Hello friends, and welcome to a new episode of Disturbing Reddit Stories. Today, we once again dive into the darkest and most terrifying memories of ordinary people. I'm 18 years old, and I want to share something horrifying that happened just minutes ago. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Quebec, where nothing strange ever happens. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and the nights are calm, almost soothing. I've lived here my whole life, and the only thing that really stands out is the massive field behind my house, stretching toward a dense, dark forest that almost no one ever enters. This evening, I was with my cousin, and what we experienced made us run without looking back. We were walking not far from my house, in a small neighborhood with neat lawns, a few benches, and open green space surrounded by old oak trees. It was around 9:30 p.m. The sky had already darkened, and only the dim glow of streetlights lit the paths. My cousin and I were sitting on a bench, chatting about nothing important, laughing at a stupid joke, when we suddenly heard strange sounds. They weren't applause. They were sharp, rhythmic claps, like someone slowly bringing their hands together with deliberate, terrifying precision. I laughed nervously and said, "Oh, it's just our neighborhood cult." But the laughter quickly turned hysterical. We fell silent and listened. The clapping didn't stop, and the rhythm was so mechanical it felt inhuman. It was coming from far away, from the direction of the field. I noticed my cousin tense up, her eyes widening, but we tried not to panic yet. "Maybe someone's joking," I said, though my voice was shaking. We kept talking, trying to distract ourselves, but after a few minutes something even worse joined the clapping. Singing. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard, deep, loud voices, almost choral, powerful yet disturbingly monotonous. They were singing in a language I couldn't recognize. Not French. Not English. Something alien, guttural, with drawn-out vowels that sent chills down my spine. The sound was so strong it felt like it vibrated through the air, as if the forest itself was singing. I looked at my cousin. Her face had gone pale. "This isn't normal," she whispered. Cold gripped my body, my heart pounding. "Run," I said. We jumped up and ran down the path toward the road. The clapping and chanting grew louder, as if the source was getting closer. I looked back once, and instantly regretted it. At the edge of the field, shapes moved in the darkness. There were several of them, moving slowly but deliberately, like they knew exactly where they were going. We didn't stop to look closer. We ran until we reached the road, gasping for breath, legs trembling, and didn't stop until we reached my cousin's house. She got into the car with her mom to go home, and I stayed behind, waiting for her call. Half an hour later, she called. Her voice was shaking. She and her mom had seen them. A group of people, around 10, wearing long robes. Most were beige or white, but one stood out in black, like a leader. They were walking across the field toward the forest. Their steps were slow, almost ritualistic. One of them carried a powerful flashlight, like a spotlight. They didn't look around, but their movements felt inhuman. My cousin and her mom froze in the car, afraid to move. "They didn't look like people," she said. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. We agreed she would come back soon and that we'd try to figure out what this was, but now I can't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The field and the forest used to feel like just part of the landscape. Now I remember the old stories from elderly neighbors, about strange lights sometimes seen in the woods, about people who went in and never came back. One neighbor once mentioned that in the 1980s, a group of hikers disappeared in that forest. I never paid attention before. Now those stories don't seem so fictional. I'm sitting at home with all the doors locked, but every sound outside makes me flinch. The singing is still echoing in my head, and I can't stop thinking that those people knew we were there. What if they noticed us? What if they come back? My cousin and I want to investigate, but I'm not sure we're ready for what we might find in that forest. This next story happened to me in 2018, when I was working as a temporary teacher at a rural school. This story haunted me for years. I never dared to talk about it, but I kept the evidence. At the time, I was a young teacher, full of enthusiasm. I was offered a 2-month substitute position at an elementary school in a remote village. From the moment I arrived, the place felt strange. The school building was old, made of stone, built in the 1930s. The walls were yellowed, the stairs creaked, and every classroom had its own smell, dampness, old wood, or something else I couldn't identify. The principal greeted me warmly and briefly told me about the class. Second graders. A good, calm group. There's just one boy, she added. What's unusual about him? I asked. She looked away and smiled too quickly. Nothing serious. He's just a little strange. The first day was normal. The children were curious and excited about a new teacher. But in the far corner of the classroom sat a boy alone, head lowered. Jules. He had no pencil case, no notebooks, only an old black leather briefcase neatly placed beside his desk. It was impossible not to notice it. Cracked leather, a handle stitched with black thread, and a tag with the embroidered initials JM. I assumed it stood for Jules Morel. Looking back now, I'm not sure it did. There was no student file for him. No paperwork. Just him and that briefcase. On Friday evening, as I was leaving the classroom, I noticed Jules had left his briefcase on the floor. I tried to catch him, but he was already gone. I placed my hand on the briefcase, and I swear, the leather was icy. Not cold from bad heating, but frozen. Gathering my courage, I opened it. Inside was a small black notebook, torn in places, an old black and white photograph blurred with age, and a yellowed sheet of paper folded into quarters. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "When you're not looking, he sleeps." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but a heavy feeling settled in my stomach. The notebook was a diary. First page. My name is Jules M. I am 8 years old. He comes at night. He scratches. He doesn't speak. He watches me. It got worse. Mom doesn't believe me. She says I'm making it up. But tonight he was here. He climbed into my briefcase. He said, "When you're not looking, I sleep." Every night, Jules wrote about the sounds, scraping, quiet laughter, shadows. He mentioned something, a man without eyes, without a mouth, with a smooth face. I looked at the photograph. It showed a child, about 8 or 9 years old, standing in front of the same school where I worked. The same haircut. The same stare. The same briefcase. I flipped the photo over. Written in pencil. Jules M. died in 1973. My head spun. I almost vomited. I went home and went to bed, trying to forget everything. At 3:47 a.m., I heard scratching under my bed. Dry. Rhythmic. Like fingernails dragging across wood. I looked under the bed. Nothing. I turned on the light. The photograph was lying on my nightstand. On Monday, I returned to the school and went straight to administration. I asked about Jules Morel. The secretary looked at me strangely. "I'm sorry, but we have no student by that name." She checked every record. No Jules. No JM. No black briefcase. I returned to the classroom. The desk in the corner was empty. No briefcase. No trace. I thought I was losing my mind. 2 days later, a package arrived at my home. No name. No stamp. No return address. Inside was the briefcase, and a note. "You looked." I hid the briefcase in the far corner of my attic. But every year, on November 5th, a new handwritten page appears in the notebook. The last one said, "He's out. You sleep too much." I've never seen Jules again. But last year, a former teacher from the region contacted me. He sent a photo. The same briefcase. The same notebook. And a note. It's not the child returning. It's what he locked away. Now I barely sleep. I never look under my bed, and I don't talk about it to anyone. But this morning, when I opened my door, I found a black briefcase on my doorstep, ice cold. Inside was a note. "You shouldn't have looked. My name is Roxanne. I'm 19 years old." This story happened to me along with my best friend Marion, who is the same age as me, her brother Elliot, who is 25, and his girlfriend Fantine. Marion and I are huge fans of escape rooms. We go to them regularly and are very familiar with how they usually work, the standard welcome, safety rules, explanations, and so on. About 3 weeks ago, the four of us decided to go to an escape room together. It had a paranormal theme, a series of murders in a house, and we were supposed to play the role of urban explorers trying to uncover the cause. But even before we got there, things started to feel off. Booking online was impossible. The website showed that all time slots were full, even though just 2 weeks earlier you could book for the same day without any issue. That was strange, especially since this escape room didn't seem particularly popular. We decided not to overthink it and tried calling instead. Marion called about 5 times, but no one answered. I tried too, and eventually sent a message to the number listed on the website. It was a mobile number starting with 06. 40 minutes later, I got a reply saying there was one last session available at 9:30 p.m. and that payment had to be made on site. I clarified that there would be 4 of us and confirmed the booking. We were excited, we'd wanted to try this room for a long time. When it was time to go, we got into the car. About 10 minutes into the drive, Marion said she had a bad feeling. We always take those kinds of instincts seriously. I felt strange too, like something was about to happen. At first, we thought maybe we were just anxious about getting into an accident. We talked it through, then decided to stop discussing it so we wouldn't jinx anything. The rest of the drive was silent. We parked in a dark parking lot. That wasn't surprising, it was winter, and it gets dark early. We entered the building and found ourselves facing 4 doors. On the right was the control room where the game master monitors the players. On the left was our room, and further left was another room and the restrooms. We waited in the lobby, chatting. Nothing explicitly scary, but the atmosphere felt strange. No one said it out loud, yet the tension was noticeable. On the right were open lockers. On the left was a couch piled with personal belongings. Normally, in escape rooms, players store their things in lockers, so this already felt off. Suddenly, a man, the game master, came out of our room and said. The door was open. He closed it and walked away. We exchanged glances but said nothing. Then we saw players exiting the other room, and Marion whispered. They still have their phones. That was odd. In escape rooms, phones are usually taken away to prevent cheating and to maintain immersion. We were surprised but tried not to focus on it. At that moment, we heard a man's voice coming from the other room, complaining that their game had been interrupted due to a malfunction. We reassured ourselves that it must have been a different room with a different scenario. The group gathered their things and left. The game master locked the door behind them with a key. That's when things got really strange. The man looked at each of us in turn. His gaze was heavy, piercing. In horror-themed escape rooms, game masters sometimes intentionally make players uncomfortable, but this felt different. We had arrived excited, but his stare turned that excitement into anxiety. We sat down on the couch. He said he didn't care if we had our phones, but it would be better not to use them. Same with our belongings, put them in the lockers if we want, he didn't care. His complete disregard for the rules shocked us. He only added that no physical strength was required in the room, everything was automatic. And if something didn't work, it meant we were doing it wrong. He couldn't intervene. We stood up. I was clearly rushing, and he noticed. Didn't you take your Prozac? He asked. I laughed automatically, not fully processing what he meant, and jokingly replied. No, I took a sedative. He stared at me coldly. Prozac is a sedative. He said nothing more, just kept looking at me. There was no introduction to the story, no explanation of our roles. He simply led us into the room and slammed the door shut behind us. We looked at each other, confused, and started discussing what had just happened. Fantine, who works in the medical field, laughed and said that Prozac isn't really talked about anymore. We all agreed that the atmosphere felt heavy. The game began. We had a walkie-talkie to contact the game master, but whenever we asked for hints, he either stayed silent or replied with, "Look around," or "think," and nothing else. In the third room, there were so many tasks that we split up. Marion and I worked on a puzzle that required pressing 4 buttons at the same time, but 2 of them were too high. We built a tower out of children's blocks. Elliot and Fantine were working on paintings that needed to be rotated into the correct positions. Suddenly, Elliot shouted in surprise. Marion and I laughed and went back to our puzzle. We pressed the buttons. Nothing happened. We tried again. And again. Still nothing. Time ran out. Usually, when the timer reaches 0, it continues counting upward, 1, 2, 3, showing how much extra time you took. But this time, the timer reset to 59 minutes. It was strange, but we were too disappointed about failing to finish the game to think much of it. We waited for the game master. He tries 3 times to enter, opening and closing the door. Then he finally stays. His only comment is, "Well, go on, finish it anyway." Marion and I explain that the buttons don't work. He tries himself, no result. Then he hits the wooden structure. A board with nails falls off, and with it, the last key we needed. Let me remind you, everything is supposed to be automatic. Nails hammered into wood cannot fall out automatically. This means the puzzle was unsolvable, and without it, we couldn't move forward. We exchange looks, look at him, he hands over the key and tells us to finish. The atmosphere becomes unbearable. He stands there, watching us move from room to room. His stare is frightening. It feels like he himself is uncomfortable, as if he's just as lost as we are. His presence makes the air feel thick. We feel physically unwell. We finish the room and leave. We gather our things, and Marion and I ask to take a photo. This is a common practice in escape rooms for social media. Usually, game masters suggest where to stand so you don't spoil puzzles. But he once again says he doesn't care. Take any props and do whatever you want. We pose. He takes the photo and repeats 4 times. iPhones. __, quality is trash. Why do you pay so much money? His words feel completely inappropriate. We don't know him. We just want to leave. We grab our things and hastily say that everything was great. That the decorations were cool, even though that wasn't true. And that the experience was excellent. We mention to Marion that we like horror rooms. He replies that it's complete nonsense. Especially with actors who scare people. He tells a story about one room where a man with a chainsaw approached him. And he said, "Put a real chain on it, then it'll be scary." We think he's joking to seem cool. But his face remains emotionless, almost threatening. We decide to leave. Before we go, he looks at Elliot and says, "You're not very manly. You screamed like a girl at every little noise." Elliot laughs awkwardly. I try to lighten the mood, and we leave. As soon as we turn our backs to the door, he turns off all the lights and locks himself in his office. In the car, Elliot says, "Now that it's over, I'll say this. As soon as we walked in, I had a bad feeling. I almost suggested we leave." His words give us goosebumps. Elliot always senses these things. If he had said it earlier, we would have left. We realize we avoided something bad. I check the Google reviews. The latest ones are dated 4 months ago. They describe a kind, passionate game master. The complete opposite of the man we met. Even stranger, the website says the place closes at 10 p.m. Meaning the last session should be at 8:30 p.m. With half an hour for cleaning. A 9:30 p.m. session should not exist. He invited us when the place was already closed. In the car, after learning about the reviews and the opening hours, we felt both fear and relief. Elliot said that if he hadn't wanted to let us out, he could have easily done so. The door was hard to open. If he had planned something, I wouldn't be telling this story. Even scarier, 3 weeks earlier, Marion and I wanted to go just the 2 of us. We often do that. But as 2 skinny girls, we wouldn't have been able to resist. The fact that there were 4 of us, including a guy, may have saved us. A week later, while we were at Marion's mom's house, not far from the escape room city, I went to their website. On the Google page it said, "Closed." I sent it to our group chat with Marion, Elliot, and Fantine. We were shocked and realized we had avoided something serious. No booking available, a strange phone number, the place shutting down. Everything adds up. One positive thing, we didn't pay. He didn't ask for money, didn't write saying we forgot to pay. We wanted to leave quickly to avoid paying. And to get away from that strange man. It was an ordinary evening. I was heading home after meeting friends in the city. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I exited the station. The station wasn't completely empty, but not crowded either. I was walking quickly, wearing headphones, when I noticed a man at the end of the street. He was quite far away but walking toward me. At first, I barely paid attention to him. But the closer he got, the stronger my discomfort grew. He looked strange, not threatening at first glance. Just unnatural. He was wearing a dark jacket, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't walking fast or nervously. But what alarmed me was that he was staring directly at me as he approached. As if I wasn't just a random passerby to him. I sped up, and he did too. My house wasn't far, but I had a strange feeling that he was trying to catch up to me. I took off my headphones to hear what was happening around me. Then he called out to me in a calm but insistent voice, asking if I knew where a certain street was. I answered without stopping, trying to keep my distance. But he didn't back off. He started walking behind me, continuing to talk strangely, asking very specific questions about my routes, my routine. As if he already knew something about me. Every answer I gave seemed to encourage him. As if he had prepared for this encounter in advance. I walked even faster, but he followed. I heard his footsteps on the pavement. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I didn't have my phone in my hands. And the street was fairly empty. I turned into an alley, hoping to lose him. But he turned there too. At that moment, instinct told me to hide. I rushed into a small cafe that, luckily, was still open. Praying he wouldn't follow me. Bursting in, out of breath. I asked the barista for help. But she looked at me in confusion. I didn't dare look out the window to check if he was still there. I ordered a drink as an excuse to stay. Until he left. I never saw him go. I stayed there a long time. And when I finally went outside, I didn't see anyone. That night, I took a taxi to get home. To this day, I don't understand how he could have found me. Or why he knew where I was going. Since that evening, I haven't been able to get rid of the fear. The feeling that he might appear again. Just like the first time. This happened several years ago. When I was about 12 years old. And the memories still make me tremble. Everything began when my mother agreed to take part in distributing census forms. These were questionnaires used to find out how many people lived in each house, their ages, and so on. My mom asked me and my two older brothers to help deliver these forms to mailboxes in our small town in Quebec. It was something new for us, and honestly, we even enjoyed it. It was summer, the sun was shining, the air was fresh, and we walked through the streets chatting and laughing. We split up to cover more houses, and everything went smoothly. It was one of those days when it feels like everything will go perfectly. A week or two later, my family and I went to a town celebration at a local bar. It was loud, music was playing, adults were drinking beer, and kids were running around. I became friends with a few girls from nearby streets, and we sat on a bench talking. At some point, one of them, Julie, lowered her voice and told a story that sent chills down my spine. She said that a strange man had appeared in town, wearing a dark blue suit. He wandered the streets, especially in the evenings, and talked to children. No one knew why. Some said he asked for directions, others said he offered candy or asked kids to come to his house to help with something. The girls whispered that he looked too neat for our town, where people usually dressed simply, and that his stare was empty, like a doll's. I laughed, deciding it was just a local legend, but deep down, I felt scared. We continued delivering census forms a few more times. Mom assigned the streets, and my brothers and I each took a stack of forms. It became routine. I walked along familiar streets, slipped the forms into mailboxes, sometimes chatting with neighbors. But one day, everything changed. It was a warm evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange. Mom gave me a stack of forms and told me to walk down a small street on the outskirts of town, where houses were more spread out and a field began behind them, leading into the forest. I didn't see anything scary about it. I knew the town like the back of my hand. But when I reached the end of the street, where the houses stopped, I heard a man's voice, low, but with a strange tone. As if he was trying to sound friendly, but it came off as unnatural. "Hey, girl, could you help me?" I froze. Slowly, I turned around. A few meters away stood a man in a dark blue suit. His face was pale, almost waxy, and his eyes were empty, as if he were looking right through me. He was holding something, maybe a book or a folder, and was smiling slightly, but the smile looked forced. At that moment, I remembered the girl's story from the festival. My heart started pounding, my legs felt weak. I didn't answer. I turned around and ran toward my mom's car faster than I ever had in my life. I heard him shout something after me, but the words were drowned out by the sound of wind rushing in my ears. When I reached the car, I jumped inside, gasping for air, but I didn't say anything to my mom. She asked if everything was okay, and I just nodded, afraid to even look back. The next day, I met the same girls at the park. They noticed that I looked scared, and I told them I had seen the man in the blue suit. They exchanged looks, and Julie asked, "Were you on the street by the old oak tree?" "Yes. That's near his house." According to them, he lived in one of the old houses on the outskirts of town, where hardly anyone ever went. They assured me I did the right thing by running away, because one girl had supposedly seen him trying to lure a child into his yard, but the child managed to escape. I felt a cold weight in my chest. What if he had seen me delivering the forms? What if he knew where I lived? 3 or 4 weeks passed. My mom and I went grocery shopping at a local store. On the way back, we passed a small bar on the main street, a place where locals gathered to chat over coffee. I was carrying a bag of groceries when I suddenly noticed him. The same man in the dark blue suit was standing at the entrance of the bar, slowly scanning the street. His movements were strangely smooth, like a predator searching for prey. Our eyes met for a split second, and I felt the blood drain from my face. He didn't smile or nod. He just stared, and that stare felt like a needle piercing straight through me. I grabbed my mom's hand and pulled her along faster, mumbling that I wanted to go home. She was surprised but didn't argue. I didn't look back, but the whole time I felt like he was watching my back. At home, I locked the door and checked all the windows. I didn't tell my mom because I was afraid she wouldn't believe me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew who I was, and that this wasn't our last encounter. Since then, I try not to walk alone in the evenings, especially in that part of town. Sometimes I feel like I see his shadow on a street corner or hear footsteps behind me, even when no one is there. The girls from the park said that he kept appearing, but the adults I tried to tell only shrugged and said they didn't know any man like that. Still, I know my friends had seen him too, and they felt the same fear I did. To this day, I don't understand who he was or what he wanted, but his empty stare and the words, "Can you help me?" still echo in my head like a warning. I'm afraid he's still somewhere nearby, watching and waiting. And I pray that I will never meet him again. It all started when I moved with my family to a small town in the south of France. A new house, a new village, a new school, new friends. Everything was a fresh start. The school year went smoothly. I settled in quickly and became friends with the local kids. Then summer arrived. In this region, every summer there are so-called vives, traditional village festivals held in nearby towns. I had never been to anything like that before, and my friend Laura, who lived in a neighboring village, invited me to go with her. So my mom wouldn't have to pick me up late at night. We agreed that I would sleep over at Laura's place. I was thrilled. It felt like my first real adventure in this new place. On the day of the festival, I arrived at Laura's house in the afternoon and left my backpack in her room. We had dinner with her family and then walked to the festival, which was only about 10 minutes away. The celebration was in full swing. Bright lights, small carousels for kids, game booths where you could win stuffed animals, duck fishing, tents selling cotton candy, sweets, and sandwiches. A DJ was playing on stage, blasting loud music that drowned everything else out. Nearby was a bar where adults drank wine and beer, laughing and dancing. The atmosphere was fun, but a little chaotic. Laura and I walked through all the attractions, bought cotton candy, laughed at the ridiculous prizes, and just enjoyed the evening. Around midnight, we got bored and decided to leave the fair. Nearby was a stadium where a crowd had gathered, mostly high school students and older guys, many of them very drunk. Some of the guys started staring at us too insistently. They approached us, joked, asked for our phone numbers. Their looks and comments became more and more inappropriate, and Laura and I started to feel uncomfortable. "Let's get out of here," I said. We decided to head back to her house. But we weren't tired yet, so instead of going straight home, we decided to walk through the quiet residential streets of her village. The streets were narrow, lit by only a few streetlights, and the houses were hidden in the shadows of gardens. We were chatting, laughing, recalling silly moments from the festival, and everything felt carefree. But about 20 minutes later, I heard noise behind us. A car. Loud music. Bass so strong the air vibrated. It was approaching slowly and almost stopped when it reached us. Laura and I turned around. It was an old white car with tinted windows. Inside were 4 or 5 guys, around 20 or 22 years old. Their faces were dimly lit by a street lamp, and their looks weren't just curious. They were heavy, predatory stares, like they were studying us as prey. One of them, sitting in the front seat, smiled slightly. That smile sent chills down my spine. The car suddenly drove off, and Laura and I exchanged glances. "Drunk idiots," she said, trying to brush it off. "Probably thought we were someone else," I added. But a bad feeling had already settled in my chest. We kept walking, but a few minutes later I noticed headlights ahead of us. The same white car was driving toward us. That meant they had turned around. My stomach tightened. The silhouettes inside the car were still, but I could feel their eyes on us even through the dark windows. Laura kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. My head felt foggy. My whole body tensed up. Every instinct screamed, "Run." I tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. We reached the next intersection, and the car appeared again. The third time, it drove past us slowly. I noticed the driver staring straight at me, without looking away. This wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, like they knew exactly what they were doing. The car drove a little farther toward a turn, and without taking my eyes off it, I whispered to Laura. "If they turn around now, we take the alley on the left and run straight to your house. No stopping." Laura looked at me like I was crazy. "What's wrong with you, Jess?" "Everything's fine. Relax." But I couldn't relax. We stood there for a couple of seconds, watching the car. Then it slowed down at the intersection. The headlights swung, and the car began to turn around. "Run!" I shouted and bolted into the alley. Laura ran after me, but slower, like she didn't really believe it was serious. I glanced back and saw her trip over a huge stone in the middle of the road. It was like a cheap horror movie where the heroine falls at the worst possible moment. I almost exploded with anger. "Laura, get up. This isn't a joke, move." She got up, limping, and started running faster, still muttering that I was panicking for nothing. Then we heard it behind us. The sharp screech of brakes. Car doors slamming, not one, but several. A male voice, rough and angry, shouted, "Where are they? Where did they go?" My blood froze, and my legs carried me faster on their own. We ran without looking back, through the dark alley where the streetlights barely worked and the shadows of trees seemed alive. Laura's house was only one street away, but those seconds felt endless. I heard footsteps and voices behind us, but I couldn't make out what they were shouting. Finally, we reached her house, burst inside, slammed the door, and locked it with every lock. I stood there pressed against the wall, gasping for air, my heart pounding wildly. Laura was holding her ankle and started complaining. "Because of you, I almost broke my leg." "What the hell, Jess?" She was angry, but I could tell she just didn't understand. For her, it was just a stupid run. But I knew something was wrong. Those guys weren't just looking for a joke. Their stares. Their persistence. Their voices. It was something far worse. We were too young to know what to do. Laura's parents were asleep, and we didn't wake them. We didn't call the police. We didn't tell anyone. We just went up to her room, went to sleep, and the next morning Laura was still sulking because of her injured ankle. On Monday, she came to college on crutches. The injury turned out to be serious, and she blamed me for panicking. For the entire next month, she told everyone how I had made her run because of some car, and it became a local joke. But I couldn't laugh. I knew that my intuition had saved us. I didn't think about that story for many years, until recently, when I was talking with my boyfriend and a friend about scary real-life situations. They were listening to a podcast that said almost every woman experiences something frightening at least once in her life. At first, I thought it hadn't happened to me. But then that night resurfaced in my memory, as if someone had turned on a projector. I told my boyfriend everything, and he was shocked. "Jess, you could have really been in danger. How did you even forget this?" That's when I realized I must have been in such shock back then that I simply buried the memory. I had lived my whole life in the same village, where I went to school from kindergarten to college. When I entered 6th grade, my parents allowed me to walk to school alone, like a grown-up, because the college was only a 5 to 10-minute walk from home. During the first weeks of taking that route, I noticed a woman on the opposite side of the sidewalk. She was there every day, always wearing the same dark green sweater and slightly dirty pants. She stood motionless in front of a building near the intersection and watched me as I walked by. At first, I didn't pay much attention. I just passed her and continued on my way. But one day, when I arrived at college, I asked my friends if they knew her. They said no, but they had seen her several times in the same spot. According to rumors, she had once followed one of my friends all the way to her house. After that, I started feeling uncomfortable whenever I passed by. I could clearly feel that she was watching me. So I slightly changed my route to college to avoid being in her line of sight as much as possible. With this new path, I felt safer and slowly started to forget about her. But one day, just before turning onto my new route, I saw her again. She was on the opposite side of the sidewalk, but not in her usual place. Instead of standing in front of the building at the intersection, she was on the other side of it, closer to my new route. In all the time I had seen her, she had never moved from her spot, so I'll admit, I got scared. I just sped up and continued walking like usual. But as I walked toward college, I heard footsteps behind me. I assumed it was another student or a friend, since many kids used that route. I turned around. It was her, about 10 meters behind me. I panicked and walked even faster, trying to reach the college as quickly as possible. When I reached the gates, showed my student planner, and went inside, I felt relieved. I knew she wouldn't be able to follow me in, she was an adult and not part of the staff. I stood in the hallway and saw her standing at the gate, staring at me. A few seconds later, she walked away. I thought it was over and started waiting for my friends like usual. But a few minutes later, I saw her again, this time inside the college reception area. I panicked even more and watched as she spoke to the woman at the front desk. Then pointed at me. I didn't understand anything. The receptionist looked at me and kept talking. Then the woman who had followed me left. In that moment, I didn't know whether to feel relieved that she was gone or terrified that she had tried to enter the college. When my friends arrived, I told them everything in a panic, and they were scared too. I didn't dare ask the receptionist why the woman had come, but I suspect she tried to pretend she was my mother, coming to pick me up, which made no sense, since it was 8 o'clock in the morning. After that incident, I refused to walk to college alone, and my parents started driving me every morning. Later, when I moved on to high school, that crazy woman from the village disappeared, and I didn't see her again during all my years at college. That could have been the end of the story. But last year, when I was in my final year of high school in a neighboring town, I was talking with a friend. She was a year younger and studied at the same college, but we hadn't been friends back then. I casually told her this story. She calmly replied that she had seen that woman in town, and that she had been hanging around the laundromat for a long time. Honestly, I wish I hadn't known that. The laundromat was far from the high school, so I never ran into her, but my friend's words stayed in my head. One day, while I was driving through town with my dad, we passed by the laundromat. And of course, she was there. I hadn't seen her in years, and I truly didn't want to see her again. I am 19 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town in Belgium where nothing unusual ever happens. At least, that's what I thought, until that September evening last year. This story turned my life upside down, leaving a scar that feels like it will never heal. It was September 2024, the end of a warm day, and I was returning home from university classes, as usual. I study in a nearby city, and my route home is always the same. A bus to my stop, then a 5-minute walk through the familiar streets of our sleepy town. The streets are quiet, lined with neat houses and only a few passers-by. I had always felt safe there. That evening, the sun was already setting. The sky was painted with orange and pink streaks, and the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. I was walking with my headphones on, gently swaying to the rhythm of the music, unaware that this evening would change everything. I got off the bus at my stop, just as I had done hundreds of times before. The street was empty. A dog barked somewhere in the distance as I started walking toward home, glancing at my phone. A minute later, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that a vehicle was slowly driving alongside me. A dark, worn van, not new, with dirty windows reflecting the last rays of sunset. At first, I didn't think much of it. In our town, cars sometimes drive slowly, especially if someone is looking for an address. But something about the way the van was moving made me uneasy. It was driving too close to the sidewalk, almost brushing the curb, and it wasn't speeding up. I lowered the volume of my music and glanced at the vehicle. The driver, a middle-aged man wearing a dark cap, was staring straight at me. His face was partially hidden by shadows, but a chill ran down my spine. He slowly rolled down the window. Thinking he might be lost, I removed one earbud. "Hey, hi," he said in a low, raspy voice that sounded far too friendly to be sincere. "Do you want a ride home? It's getting dark, it's not safe to walk alone." His words sounded caring, but something in his tone, too insistent, with a hint of mockery, made my heart race. I smiled politely, like I had been taught, and said, "No thank you, I'm almost home. Just a couple of minutes." I sped up, hoping he would leave. He didn't. The van kept pace beside me. The tires whispered against the asphalt as he spoke again. "Come on, get in. I'll drive you. It's no trouble." His voice became more demanding, almost authoritative. I noticed him leaning closer to the window, as if trying to get a better look at me. I felt his gaze scanning every detail, my face, my backpack, my clothes. My breathing quickened. "No, really, I'm fine," I replied. I walked faster, almost running, avoiding looking in his direction. I turned the corner. The van followed, now moving faster. The street was empty. Not a single person. Streetlights were beginning to turn on, casting long shadows. I removed my second earbud to hear better, and that's when I noticed the engine noise fade. I glanced over my shoulder. The van had stopped at the curb a few meters behind me. The driver's door opened. I saw him step out. Tall. Thin. Wearing a dark jacket and the same cap, hiding his eyes. He wasn't looking directly at me, but his movements were quick and purposeful. And I understood. He was coming after me. I bolted. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would tear through my chest. The street leading to my house was right ahead, but every step felt like an eternity. I could hear his footsteps behind me, heavy, quick, crunching on the gravel sidewalk. I turned around. He was closer than I had expected, about 10 meters away. And now I could clearly see his face, pale, with sharp features. My house was already in sight. The white fence, the familiar gate, lights in the windows. I remembered the front door might be locked and decided to run to the backyard, where the gate was always open. I turned into the alley. My legs were trembling, my backpack bouncing against my back, and my mind was consumed by a single question. Why me? What does he want? I could hear his footsteps growing louder, and for a moment, it felt as if he was right behind me, as if I could feel his breath on my neck. I burst into the yard, slammed the gate shut, and ran to the back door, praying it would be open. Fortunately, it yielded, and I ran inside, gasping, shouting. "Mom, "Dad, call the police. Someone was following me." My parents, sitting in the living room, jumped up. Their faces went pale as I, out of breath, told them what had happened. Mom grabbed the phone, and Dad ran to check the yard. I stood trembling, watching out the window, expecting to see his dark figure behind the fence. But the street was empty. Only a flickering street lamp illuminated the empty alley. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 uniformed officers listened to me carefully. I described the man, about 40, thin, wearing a dark cap and jacket, with a sharp gaze, and the dark van with dirty windows. They took notes, said they would patrol the area, and left. I couldn't calm down. Every minute, I expected him to appear at our house. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. I was afraid to leave the house, even during the day. Every sound of a car made me flinch. Every passerby seemed suspicious. I stopped listening to music through my headphones, constantly looking over my shoulder. My parents began driving me to and from school, even though I had once been proud of my independence. I felt cornered, as if this man had stolen my freedom. At night, I dreamed of his eyes, his footsteps. I woke up in cold sweats, checking to make sure the windows were locked. 2 weeks later, on Wednesday, I received a call from the police station. They asked me to come in to give an official statement. I was nervous but went with my dad. In the interrogation room, a serious officer with tired eyes listened to my story. Then he placed a photo in front of me, the face of the same man, sharp features, dark eyes, the cap I could never forget. "Is this him?" asked the officer. I nodded, my throat tightening with fear. He nodded and said something that made my blood run cold. "We arrested him. He was already known to us for cases involving kidnappings and assaults on underage girls. The day you saw him, he was tracking another potential victim, but we were able to stop him." I sat, speechless. The officer explained that he was caught in a nearby town trying to lure another girl into his van using the same tactics, pretending to be friendly, offering a ride. His arrest was somewhat accidental. A patrol noticed a suspicious van parked near a school and decided to investigate. They already had my description, which helped connect him to my case. Inside his vehicle, they found ropes, adhesive tape, and other items indicating his intentions. The officer gently added, "You did the right thing by running. It probably saved you." I returned home, but relief was mixed with horror. I had avoided abduction, yet the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't run, if the gate had been locked, if he had caught me, haunted me for months. I became afraid of the dark and of walking alone, even in my supposedly safe town. Even now, almost a year later, I flinch at the slow sound of a car behind me. This experience changed me. I am no longer the carefree girl who trusted every stranger. I learned to trust myself, but I never feel truly safe. It happened in July 2025. I was relaxing with a close friend, Luca, at a campsite on the outskirts of Nevers, a small French town surrounded by fields. We spent the day enjoying wine and conversation, and in the evening, we went to a local bar and started talking to the bartender. He mentioned that about 600 meters from our campsite stood an abandoned hotel. Huge, dark, with broken windows, a perfect place for urban exploration. In my usual role as the generator of idiotic ideas, I immediately got excited. "Let's go there right now." It was already 11 p.m. Nighttime, but Luca didn't need much convincing. I ignored a faint feeling of unease. I've never really had a survival instinct. We grabbed our headlamps and a bottle of water and set off. The hotel rose on a hill like a grim ghost, its silhouette barely visible under the dim moonlight. It was a massive 3-story building, with peeling paint and empty windows that looked like black voids. 2 small annexes stood nearby, probably former offices or a reception, with crooked doors and walls overgrown with weeds. The air was heavy, smelling of dampness and rotting wood. Only a faint wind rustled the leaves, creating a barely audible whisper. My headlamp cast a narrow beam of light, illuminating shards of broken glass, graffiti, and scraps of old curtains swaying in the empty windows. Luca, fearless as always, joked that we would find ghosts or hidden treasures. I forced a smile. We started in the hotel basement. The descent was narrow. Concrete steps crumbled underfoot. Luca went ahead, lighting the corners, while I photographed to capture the eerie atmosphere. We joked to ease the tension, but I noticed how our voices echoed through the empty corridors, as if the building itself absorbed them. At one point, I stopped to photograph an old, dust-covered mirror, and suddenly realized Luca was gone. The steps I had heard just a second ago were silent. I called out, "Luca, where are you?" No answer, only the echo of my voice. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hands, illuminating a dark corner of the basement. I called louder, but the silence was deafening, broken only by a distant creak somewhere above. Goosebumps ran down my spine, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was wrong. This place, this basement, this building, it was alive, watching, and I was an intruder. I forced myself to move. "Luca!" I shouted, making my way to the basement exit. My steps sounded too loud in the void. I circled the building outside, shining the flashlight on overgrown bushes and broken windows, but he was nowhere to be seen. Panic rose, but I tried to convince myself he had just gone into one of the annexes. And suddenly, the feeling vanished, as abruptly as it had appeared, as if someone had switched off an alarm. I turned and saw Luca coming out of one of the annexes, 10 meters from the main building. His face was pale, eyes wide, but he tried to smile. "Hey, where have you been?" "I found a cool annex. Let's check it out." I exhaled in relief, but something felt off. I didn't trust myself. Maybe it was just fear from urban exploration. I said, "Show me what's there," and we headed toward the annex. It was a small building with a crooked door and broken windows. Inside, it was cold. The floor was littered with broken glass and old papers, and the walls had strange stains, maybe mold, or something worse. We went through a couple of small, empty rooms, with torn wallpaper and broken furniture. Luca walked ahead, lighting the way, but I could feel my heart pounding faster. The annex was small, only 6 rooms, but with every step, my fear grew. We reached the last room, and there I saw an open hatch in the floor, leading into a void. My flashlight couldn't reach the bottom. The air around the hatch was heavy, with a sharp scent of dampness and something else, metallic, almost like blood. Something flickered deep inside, and we heard a rustling. I grabbed Luca's hand and said, "Let's go. I want to show you something outside." My voice shook, but he didn't argue, noticing my expression. We left the annex, almost running toward the road, away from the building. His usually fearless face had turned pale. He admitted that when he had gone into the annex alone, he heard a strange sound. Not footsteps, but a rustling, as if someone was moving in the dark. He thought it was rats, but now he wasn't sure. And the scariest part, I realized we hadn't seen a single person the entire time. We returned to the campsite in silence. The flashlights trembled in our hands, and I couldn't stop looking back, expecting to see a dark figure following us. That night, I didn't sleep, listening to every rustle outside the tent, imagining someone creeping toward us from that building. The next day, I tried to find information about the hotel online, but only found old articles about its closure in the 1990s due to bankruptcy. Nothing about crimes or strange incidents, but that didn't calm me down. If you liked this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are even more chilling stories ahead.